Brought to you by NORDIC Podcast.
Guys, I love this. Thank you so much. Do I do my thanks now or thanks before or thanks after?
Whenever, man. But
All right.
we have to thank you because we're here with Tauriq Adams. And honestly, the people we choose for this are specific.
Okay,
They're very specific.
right.
And the reason you're here, honestly, is you have been one of the forefront or most forefront individuals that take physical products and literally digitalize it into this app world that we're living in.
That's right.
I mean, look at what even happened with Corona, right? Everything and everyone went home and everything became more digitalized.
About time.
About time. So it's like the world is catching up to you. And your experience with digitalizing products and services was even before Foodora.
That's right. That's right.
And this is insane because you're like this guy working behind the scenes in the shadows, I feel,
Okay.
and literally like making everyone else or pulling the strings so everyone else follows you, you know? But I want to go all the way back because
Tell me. Sure.
we have you all the way from Cape Town, you could say.
That's right.
So how long have you been in Norway, first of all, so we get a sense of timeline, and then we'll go back, you know, throwback.
Okay. So my very first visit to Oslo was in 2009. I met my wife, Anna, in Cape Town in 2007. She was studying archaeology. I was in banking, private banking at the time. So I visited in 2009. It was great. I was like, okay, you know, lovely.
Right.
This is the Nordics, you know. So came back in 2010. We got married here in 2011. So that was a big sort of strategic decision on our part. Well, firstly, I've got a huge family. I've got 41 first cousins.
40, okay, wow.
You know, that's huge. So my on my dad's side, there's maybe 9 siblings. On my mom's side, 6, 7 siblings, and they all have kids.
Massive,
So
massive.
a huge family. So just purely on the business case, if you think about having a massive wedding.
Right.
So we got married here in 2011, and we always knew that at some point, when we want to, you know, start a family, it may happen in Norway. And so we formally kicked off the process in 2014. And so 2015 is really when we moved here. So 2014, 2015, and then the paperwork went through, and I got my oppholdstillatelse in 2016.
2060. But you came now, as you said, even from banking, but you came with this revolutionary, not only mindset,
Yeah,
but you came with a revolutionary new skill. Because translating physical products to the digital world is something you cannot underestimate. It is literally what everything is about in 2021.
that's right. That's right. So
Go for it. Go for it.
So, as far back as 2008, 2009, there were so many business processes and things we did in corporate companies that could just be digital, you know, and this frustrated me. So my first attempt at digitizing a product or service was creating a platform called the Copilot, which was me automating project management and me wanting to actually not be on site as a project manager. Because if you think about it, today we have all these wonderful tools like Asana, Trello, Basecamp,
Right.
Google Notes,
Right. Actually,
collaborative tools. Like, why do we need a physical person to go like, hey, Mehdi, how far are you with that document? You know, you could just have a reminder. So I tried to build this platform with a friend of mine called the Copilot, which was a online project management tool that really just kicked off little reminders when you completed a task. So, you know, if you needed to update the business requirements document and you were done, you would click submit, and then it would go to the line manager to review. And then when he's done, it goes off to the coder, etc., etc.
Exactly.
Too far ahead of its time. It didn't work. Didn't pan out.
Too early.
Too early. Way too early.
How did you realize it was too early? Did it take years after, or did you realize it on the spot?
No, I think, you know, for me, one of the things I learned in the startup world is you can have the best idea, but the best idea at the wrong time is a bad idea. You know?
See, this is dangerous already. This is already dangerous because there are so many people in startups
Yes.
that might lack the quality to recognize if they are too early, if they're doing something wrong, and trying the same thing that doesn't work over and over again.
Correct.
So how do you recognize if it's too early?
That's a great question.
Because it's a fine line between too early and you not trying hard enough.
It's an absolutely fine line. And sometimes you just plow and plow and plow, and then you crack it at the end, and then you get there through consistency, you know? So, and maybe I should just spend some time on that. I think one of the qualities that I possess that perhaps puts me, that separates myself, is the fact that at a young age I learned how to surf. Surf. You know surfing.
Right.
We've all seen it. Kelly Slater in the wave, looking great.
Right.
And then maybe, you know, you want to do it yourself. So surfing is one of those sports with the lowest barrier to entry, right? You need a surfboard and a wave. Two of the cheapest things, you know. You get a wave and a surfboard, right? But now here's the thing. This is where it gets interesting, right? So you grab the surfboard and you go out and you paddle. And there's no single person on God's earth that has caught a wave without wiping out. It's not possible. Like, you have to wipe out.
You have to fail.
So you have the vision. You want to catch the wave and look like Kelly Slater in a barrel. You have the vision. You've seen it on TV. You want to be that guy. And you go out and you try and you fail and you fail and you fail. Until maybe if you stick with it long enough, you actually do catch a wave. Now think about this for a second. Typically when you're young and when you start surfing, it's with your homies and your friends. And so you're the new guy who's not catching a wave and you're wiping out. So you've got to get comfortable with failing all the time. And knowing that at some point you may catch this wave. Most people just give up. I don't like surfing. It's not worth it. So you've got to be fit. You've got to paddle out. The conditions are rough. And you've got to enjoy the process, right? And so what this does is it builds within you a grit and a determination to go for something that at some point you may or may not get to. But it takes so much effort and work and looking like a fool because you're just wiping out all the time, dude, in front of your friends. Right. Like, your ego takes a bruising, you know? And the thing is, I think that most people are wired to reward themselves at the end. You work really hard and then you get the A and then you go for ice cream. You work really hard and then you achieve the thing and then you have the dopamine hit. Right. Whereas what I learned was the battle or the challenge for me secreted these dopamine hits. And I just love the challenge until eventually you catch the wave and now you're like, aha moment. You know, in fact, for me, the milestone was getting to the back line first. Never mind catching the wave, just paddling out and getting to the back line where there are no more waves. And that's high-fiving, you know. You're sitting there with the guys, you're like, high five. You're like, hey, man, I'm on the back line. Oh, I made it. You made it to the back, behind the waves.
So this surfing literally taught you that grit and chasing that wave, that in itself is the reward. That in itself... Yeah, instead of the let's say the marshmallow at the end, right?
Well, yeah, it's stages. You know, at every point in time, you have these little milestones and you tick these boxes, you know. And so now coming back to your timing, right? So now you get to the backline and you catch your first wave. And of course, there are other surfers as well, right? So now you start needing to understand how to read waves because suddenly, if there's 15 guys in the lineup and you're all jockeying for a wave, you're like, oh man, who's going to catch it? So then you realize, hang on a second, these things come in sets. The first wave comes, okay, Mary, you go. You know, Alex, you go. Brian, Josh, you guys go. You wait. There's another wave. There's always waves. You just wait. Teaches you patience. You don't you don't have to catch the next wave, homie. Right, you just wait. Right. Maybe you're tired, you know.
But that requires honestly taking a step back and seeing the larger picture requires a certain feeling of not only confidence in the situation, but also, I would say, trust in the fact that there is an abundance of waves.
Always.
Because if you feel there's a scarcity of waves, you're not going to wait.
Yeah, exactly. I remember dropping in on a guy who I admired. His name was Kader. He passed on, rest in peace, Kader. I remember dropping in on Kader on a beautiful wave. Like, I really dropped in. It was his wave, but I jumped in on the wave and I rode this thing, man, like a smoking left-hander all the way. And he fell off and I grabbed the wave and I just rode this thing out from the back line all the way through. And then, of course, once you catch the wave, you jump off and you paddle back. And I'm paddling back. And as I'm passing him, I'm anticipating this dude's going to be like, yo, why'd you drop in on me? I'm hating this like encounter that I'm now gonna face because you know it's a bad move, you know, it's not cool. And he's like, yo, T-Bone, nice wave there, bro. I looked at him. I was like, thanks. And he's like, don't worry, bro. There's plenty more waves. There's enough waves for all of us. And I was just like, I felt so small, man. I felt so small. So
it seems like entrepreneurship is almost summed up with chasing waves, seeing how and timing the market. Or
positioning yourself to catch the wave.
And also the camaraderie of...
Absolutely. So now you're in the back line, and what I couldn't figure out was there was this old guy, and he paddles to where nothing is happening, right? And I look at this old guy, I'm like, where's this dude going? And so the herd, all of us, we're in this one section, and the old guy just paddles away. And there's nothing on the horizon. Nothing. Like, you can't see anything. And then as this set begins to build where we are, next, on the other side is the next set building. So he's positioning himself to be in the perfect position for the next set. And that's when I realized, hang on, he's reading the horizon. He's checking the wind. He's almost preempting where the next wave is coming, and he's getting himself into position for that wave. And that's when I started looking at, and so this is happening to me at a young age in my teenage years. And the same thing happens in technology with all these waves, with programming languages, these fads, these trends. What are you anticipating? And for me, being in technology, I was always trying to jump 5 years ahead and look at how the world might change. And sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong. And so you begin to understand what technology can do. You try and anticipate the way the market's going to move. But for me, underpinning all of this is the fact that, the moment you digitize something, you have a 6 billion marketplace. It's what Spotify did.
6 billion.
There's 6 billion people. There's 6 billion. Right. So the moment you make something digital,
right,
the costs of distribution are zero.
Yeah.
You're not moving a cup or a donut or a physical item. And if you think about it, almost everything can be digitized. I mean, if we really just go if we being a little bit wild now, you could immerse yourself in other realities. You have these online games, Second Life,
right,
virtual reality games. It's all digital. You're not going anywhere. You're just putting on this headset on, and you've taken to a whole new world.
But that's where you lose everybody, and that's what makes you unique. You can see something and go, I can digitalize that, and most people will not even see that that's even possible.
Yeah,
and that's what I mean by that's where you separate yourself from the crowd. Because there are a lot of things that investors stay away from because it can't be digitalized.
Yeah.
Right? So what inspired you? For example, let's speak a little bit about the kitchen with Foodora, way before Foodora came to Norway. Like connecting those lines, right?
Yeah.
At such an early state and then managing it.
Yeah.
Was this like inspiration on the go? Was this, like you said, with the waves, timing the market, something you saw that the ripple was coming from afar, from the horizon?
So moving to Norway, I did what most other immigrants do is, try and find a cool place to hang out and have a cheap cup of coffee on tap, and right, I discovered Mesh. And I used Mesh on an ad hoc basis because I was consulting for a US-based client with IKEA, where they were activating their 300 million membership base. And in that process, I met a guy called Alex, who was also based at Mesh. And it was a very random encounter with Alex. And he was like, I'm tackling food waste. I was like, what? What do you mean? He's like, I'm tackling food waste. I was like, that's crazy. Let's sit down. And he's like, what do you do? I'm like, I've got a project management consultancy, and I take the vision and dream and turn it into a product or service. I'm the guy that sits between the vision and the outcome, and I generally just digitize products and services. And he's like, oh well, we've got to sit down. So we sat down, and what he had done was he looked at the entire value chain of food. He studied what happens from the farm to the plate. And within that process, we discovered the fact that in Norway, canteens are probably one of the most wasteful food production facilities because of the way they are subsidized.
Like cafeterias, canteens?
Canteens. Okay. So there's a law, and someone can correct me, but I think there's a law that says the canteen has to provide the precise amount of food for everyone in the building, regardless of who may or may not eat. So as an example, if there are 400 people in the building, the canteen needs to be able to provide and cater for that many people.
Even if only 20%?
Yes. because they are subsidized by fixed amounts. And so they have these subsidy models where they purchase the raw vara, the materials, as in the food, which they have to purchase. But we all know that the moment the sun comes out in Oslo, what happens? We all go out and eat, right? And so back then, what we had started with was really just the most rudimentary way for people in startups and small companies to order a meal, a prepackaged meal. And that's when I joined the team. And what we then did was we created sort of the Uber model.
Right.
And we built a platform that connected a range of restaurants to a range of companies using a on-demand type logistics setup where essentially we created a virtual canteen, a digital canteen, which meant the same thing. So the canteen offered and provided food for you. So we digitized that. We put it in an app.
Right.
So you could scroll through, and instead of just ordering from one restaurant a range of meals, you could now pick from a range of restaurants and a range of meals, place your order, and it delivered to your door. You know, fantastic.
This seems so normal today.
Today.
But that's the thing, man. And that is honestly the sign of brilliance. When people go, how come we didn't think about this? Or obviously it seems so obvious. That is when you know that if it was that obvious and yet all these people oversaw it, right?
It's the hardest thing when you jump ahead and you try and convince someone.
Right.
I mean, I think my mother-in-law still thought, up until a year, 2 years ago, that I was like, "Yo, but tu fortsatt mee baguette, do you still work in a kitchen or something,
No way.
I'm serious, this idea. Well, today I'm hoping, and today everyone knows that, you open your app, you open your phone and you order food on an app.
It's so common now.
It's so common. And I mean, again, we saw this coming as well, and we know the economics and the business model behind what we call on-demand platforms like Foodora and Wolt. These guys are taking 30% out of a restaurant, which is it's insane, and this is on-demand, which means you open the app, you choose a meal, you place the order. It then means that someone somewhere has to get on a bicycle or in a car, go to a restaurant and come back. It's simply not sustainable, especially not in Oslo. And so we saw Foodora and these guys come and they try to copy us, and I think there's Foodora for Business now and whatever. But, at the end of the day, I always ask the question, what is the problem that you're solving? Like, what's the problem you're solving? And so
what was the problem?
So the problem was quite simple. Providing cost-effective, cheap, affordable food for people without a canteen. And so you can literally just Google a list of all of the companies between 30 and 50 people, or between, I'd say, 5 and 50 people, perfect size, and have them get lunch delivered from a range of suppliers, subsidized. So the CEO goes, you know what, ordinarily in a cantina, I'd have to pay the cantina bidrag and all the subsidies. So now the CEO just says, look, man, everyone gets $50 for lunch or $100 for lunch. And then obviously if the employee spends more than that, it comes off the credit card. So we do that like twice a week, whatever, and that was that. Very simple.
It's brilliant.
Simple. Yeah.
Brilliant. So what challenges did you stumble across? I mean, obviously you were a first mover in this field at the time. You guys were obviously the only ones doing this at the time. So you must have gotten a lot of pushback, especially within Norway as an immigrant.
Look, I think...
well, I should say as an outsider, maybe not as an immigrant.
I think in that regard, we were very fortunate in as much as the sort of 3 core people were...
Natives?
Norwegian, native.
We're trying to keep it smooth here. But I see.
And so in that regard, I think there's a bit of a leg up or a one up.
Why? I know maybe we know why. But why is it an advantage to have natives in Norway when you're starting a startup?
I think let's just go back 4 or 5 years to the birth of the co-working sort of startup scene, of which mesh, in my mind, is a core component. I think 4 or 5 years ago. In fact, when I first came to Norway in all the years, I really, 2014, 2015 really was when things were like there was a scene and a vibe around mesh in the building across the road. And entrepreneurship and people with great ideas, come from all over the world. And so I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge is the fact that Norway is not an entrepreneurial country. It never has been. Yes, there's oil, but in terms of the environment, there isn't a skill set of people that are business minded. If you look at the way the society is set up, this is fast job country, you know. You grow up, you go to university, and you get your first job, and then that's great, and then off you go.
The ironic thing is, if you look at statistics, the countries that work the most per hour, so the hours worked, is actually Greece and certain we have a Greek guy here, and certain let's say the poorer, in quotes, European countries, right? And now, if you look at the Norwegian worked hours, they're actually one of the least in Europe with the highest sick leaves.
Yeah. And
that is one thing I quickly recognized the pattern, you know?
Yeah.
Norway's welfare, I mean, it's amazing. You have sick leave, maternity leave, paternity leave.
9 months, easily.
You don't have paternity leave in, I don't know what other countries have that, but it's rare. It's very rare. And these are amazing blessings. So why do you want to be an entrepreneur when you lose these blessings? You know?
Of course.
Now, a lot of people will be like, well, it's obvious. It's for the thrill. It's for the service. It's for the innovation. Being an entrepreneur is way more than benefits. Yeah. It's about leaving a mark in mankind's progress, you know? Then a lot of people will be like, but I lose dental.
I mean, you know what, we in one of the projects I'm working on now, and I'd like to share more at the right time, we're in stealth mode, which means we're piloting and we're testing and refining our product and service. We got 4 interns through a company that we're using, and I really love these guys. I call them the intern ups, you know.
Intern ups.
Because they turned up and they really did their thing.
That's amazing.
And we got to the end and I started asking individually, so what are your plans? And they were like, look, we just want the fast job, you know, we just want to get that employment, and there's no desire. And, you know, people grow up knowing that you've got a 2 out of 30 chance of succeeding. Success rates for new businesses are not high.
No.
The fact that we came out of the gate with a product that could make money and pay the bills and do all of those things, the odds of succeeding are just so stacked against you. And so in a country like Norway, you know, you almost have to ask the question, why would you want to? You know, like I always tell my wife, Norway is amazing for Norwegians.
Right.
You
have a point.
Norway is amazing for Norwegians. You know, so, and take nothing away from that. It's just, if you're coming here from outside with new ideas and new ways of thinking, you will come up against maybe resistance or, I think culturally, janteloven. I think it's built into the culture, not standing out. You know, like this idea that you're like, look at me, I'm the CEO, I'm the you know, rock star. No, you know.
You know what? 90% of the guests we've had on this podcast have blamed the janteloven. I am not even joking. That's not like, we can go back, and I couldn't agree more.
Yes.
I couldn't agree more.
I've got a controversial spin on that as well.
Please.
And I tell my wife this all the time. So something you have to understand about my wife is she's half Portuguese, right?
Half Portuguese.
So her mom's Portuguese and her dad's Norwegian. And so if you think of the Vikings and colonizers, I didn't stand a chance, you know. When she got hold of me, that was it, yo. She kidnapped me, she reeled me in, you know. So
oh my God.
But and so to that point, you know, I always tell her that for me, on a very simplistic level, you know, you there are 2 kinds of Norwegians, you know. There are the Norwegians that were on the boat going out to conquer land, and there are the Norwegians that stayed behind to farm more potatoes. Yeah. You know, and sometimes you meet someone and you're like, this is a Viking.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you meet someone and you're like, no, this is not a Viking.
He stayed behind.
He
didn't take up boat space.
No. And this is men and women.
Right.
And there's a very specific thing that I get from some Norwegians that are just like, they've gone abroad. They went to because I asked Anna, like, what made you go to Cape Town, South Africa? Like, what made you? And Anna, you know, visually is the softest, meekest person, but make no mistake, there's Viking and Portuguese. You know, she's strong and she's driven. You know, I made her change my car's spare wheel, you know, and she did. And people were driving past looking at me like, why are you letting this beautiful woman change your spare wheel, dude? Like, what are you doing, you know?
Oh, my Lord.
I made her drive a motorbike for the first time in her life because we were out on a beach like late one night and I just wasn't in a condition to get on a bike. And I told her, look, man, you're going to have to get us home. Like, it's 4 a.m. You know, there's the throttle, there's the brakes, there's no gears.
Jesus.
And she's like, okay, get on. You know, halfway through, I was like, okay, you need to slow down, you know. So
that is trust on your side. I'm just saying, man.
Absolutely. So I do feel that, you know, with Norwegian people, there are people that are exceptionally driven. And maybe they do end up doing amazing things within the corporate structures, or they go out and become entrepreneurs. And there are people that are not that driven, you know. And so
I really, really like the Viking analogy.
Thanks.
Like, because if you look even back at history, you know, the Pacific Ocean served as a filter. And the majority of the Vikings passed through that filter and are now taking over in the US. Yeah. If you look at a lot of people in the US come from Norway.
Yes,
Sweden,
absolutely, yeah.
Iceland. And they're dominating there. And it's like that Viking blood, right?
Explorers, mountain hikers, people, you know, trekking to the North Pole. In fact, Anna's her dad's brother, her uncle, was one of Norway's top climbers. You know, conquered so many mountains, and so there are a lot of people. And I remember meeting him, you know, and when Anna and myself got quite serious, he took us to Kolsestoppen, you know, like Hollywood mountain in Kolsas, and he's like, right, what size shoe are you? And I'm like, 42, and he's like, here's your shoes.
Beautiful.
Here's your rope.
Here's your rope.
I'm like, dude, what are we doing here, man? And he's like, you know, we're gonna go climbing.
Because it's a mindset more than anything.
Yes.
Because the research has even shown that this competitiveness or this drive, this grit, is one of the most determining factors in success for entrepreneurship.
I completely agree.
So what happens when you lose that sharp tooth, when you get dorsal, right? When you are comfortable in your little pocket?
That's a good question. And, you know, for me, you will run out of enthusiasm and spark, and you'll get tired. And that's where discipline comes in. Discipline. But so when you're tired, you rest.
Yeah.
You recharge. You come back another day. There's another wave. It's like when you surf and you wipe out, and I still wipe out, and you get crushed by a wave. Your thigh and your back, the wave just, you know, kills you. You don't go back out there immediately, bro. You paddle out and you go to the beach and you just sit on the beach and you massage your feet and you just recuperate and you regroup a little bit. And the moment you feel better, you go back out there again. You're back in the ring. You know, so people, you will get tired and you will lose your enthusiasm. It's like going to gym. Not every day you want to get to gym. I'm sure you guys know this.
Yeah.
You know, you have your off days and it's okay. Wednesday, you had a bend on. Tuesday, you're not so like that bench press is not feeling so so good. So don't hurt your muscle.
Right.
Go light. It's fine. Don't pull a tendon and come back and then you out of the gym for 3 months. Go easy. You're not a machine. We're not power tools. We were never designed to be power tools, and so rather go home, rest, recuperate, and you come back even harder the next time. Simple. There's another wave. There's another day. You know?
Yeah, I like that. So not only is pushing yourself too hard an issue, but also taking it too slow, like being in that cocoon, you know, not having the grit, not having the competitiveness, like the Vikings that stayed behind, you know, that also is a softening blow. That also will hold you back.
Oh, yeah. Look, we know this. Entrepreneurship, not for everyone. No. I can meet someone and be like, dude, get a job. You're not cut out for this. Homie, just get the job, bro. That's fine.
So let me ask you
some
this.
Some people, okay, yeah, go ahead.
No, this is good. Let me ask you this. You have seen both types of people, right?
Yes.
Entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Like born and those that, look, just get a fast job, get those dental benefits, get the healthcare. This is for you.
Absolutely.
What's the difference? How do you spot this difference?
I think for me, meeting people, you know, I love the variety and the spice of life. And I know that not everyone's an entrepreneur. Not everyone is out there doing that. And so I appreciate people for who they are and what they're about, And of course, I enjoy spending my time with other entrepreneurs and people that think like me. There's that meme on Facebook where, the lions are all rolling with the lions, roll with your pack, And I agree with that. It just... If I meet someone and if I'm talking to someone and they're asking me and they've got these ideas and they're wanting to do this thing and I can sort of see that maybe they're not cut out for it, I'd advise them and say, look, you may not be cut out for this, because a lot of people think it happens overnight, and it doesn't. It's a marathon. It's a long race, and you've got to be focused and you've got to have the discipline to keep on plowing and keep on going. That's that guy that loves the look of surfing. He tries it once and he's like, I'm not going to do this. And then he throws the board away and then he never surfs. And that's okay. Not everyone's cut out to be a surfer. The ground is changing underneath you all the time. And so you get people that surf and you get people that try it and they're not surfers. And it's okay, Play hockey. Go play golf.
Kill me there.
Play soccer, bro. Play soccer. Kick a ball. Go kick a ball.
But this is a very important distinction, honestly. And I feel also the environment. So the outside world can absolutely blunt an entrepreneur spirit and crush it, And this, for me, is my biggest fear.
Okay.
We spoke about the Antelope. You know what? Please, Wikipedia this thing. We're going to read this because the amount of guests that have brought it up and the amount of times that, including me, because I genuinely feel this is an external factor that blunts or snuffles out the spark in kids. When I just came to Norway, I was 9. The first Norwegian lesson, you know what we went through? Janteloven.
Oh my goodness. At 9?
Day 1, 9 years old. First, open your books, Janteloven.
Are you serious?
And we went through it. We went through the 10 rules of Janteloven, and I was looking around like, you guys are joking, right?
At 9 years old?
Day 1. So for those who do not know what the Janteloven is, so first of all, if I remember correctly, it is, the law of Janta, okay, it is a literary element that has been assumed by some to explain the egalitarian nature of the Nordic countries, right? The 10 rules of Janta law by a Danish-Norwegian author in a novel, A Fugitive Crosses His Tracks. That's where it came out. But this has usually been used and bred into kids at such a young age, as I told you, when I was 9. And it is almost accepted either subconsciously or deliberately. I'm still trying to figure out which one it is. By the Norwegian masses at such a young age. It's pushed. And for those who do not know, I'm going to read the 10 rules of the law of Janta, right? So the first rule is, now, when I read these rules, imagine you're a 9-year-old. You know, when you're a 9-year-old, you literally wanted to be an astronaut cowboy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You literally wanted to be the first doctor in space.
Yes.
Yeah, and now...
You're walking on the moon.
Yeah,
yes.
Literally. And then these are the 10 rules that are hammered into your head. Rule number 1, you're not to think you are anything special. Rule number 2, you're not to think you are as good as we are. I want to stop right there because already they have created a us versus them mentality. You are not as good as we are. That's an us versus them.
Yes.
There's a separation. There's no all of they've already made 2 sides of a coin. And then you're not to think you're anything special. That removes the uniqueness that every created being in the universe, I don't care if you're a flower or a rock, you have something unique to offer. We're just on 2 laws, bro. Rule number 3, you're not to think you are smarter than we are. Rule number 4, you're not to imagine yourself better than we are. Rule number 5, you're not to think you know more than we do. Look, I can literally have a TED talk on each of these rules because it's like, are you kidding me? Rule number 6, you're not to think you are more important than we are. Again, this us versus them mentality, this you and we.
Yeah.
Rule number 7, you're not to think you are good at anything. You're not to think you're good at
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
This causes already a seed of insecurity.
Of course.
Oh, try this. Yeah, but I've never tried it before. Well, you might be good. I don't know. Rule number 8, you're not to laugh at us. So what we're doing right now is against rule number 8 because we're literally we're literally laughing at them.
Yeah.
Rule number 9, you're not to think anyone cares about you. And rule number 10, you're not to think you can teach us anything.
Wow. I never actually read or have seen the 10 rules. I just vaguely had an idea of the concept.
This was literally the first class Norwegian when I just came to Norway at 9. This was,
Yeah.
and the household I come from a large household, 6 brothers. Right now, we're all, let's just say we're all doing very well when it comes to growing our potential in, spirituality, in the cognitive arts, like I like to say.
Yeah.
All my brothers are doctors. One has full scholarship in business in Boston. So it's like we do not come from a place of you're not to think you're anything special. We come from a place that every human being has been created with a unique ability to express something no one else can.
Yeah.
So this, for me, again, I'm not sure if it's deliberate or subconscious, but this is in a lot of people in the Nordics.
Yeah.
And it's literally holding back an entire country. It's reflected.
I definitely feel as though there are a lot of people, young people, that I meet that for some reason don't seem to have an outwardly focus on whether it's business or just seeing things differently. And I'm not sure if this is part of this being instilled into them. For myself, trying to be balanced in this dialogue now, I think that what I would take away from this as a positive would be the you and the we probably refers to the collective or the community, because the one thing about Norway that we know is that it's fast job country, it's a union country, the collective, everything for the collective. And if it's something else that I quite admire is the fact that I think it was 10 or 12 years that the oil stayed in the ground and the gas,
right,
until Norway figured out how we're going to do this so that it benefits everyone, right? And I could be mistaken, but I think it was an Iranian that came here as a refugee that pioneered the private-public partnership model that governed how private enterprise would actually facilitate the drilling and the processing of oil and gas, but it was owned by the state. There was this relationship between the private sector and, the state that essentially gave rise to what we now have as the world's biggest sovereign wealth fund. And so in that sense, I think the foundation for the communer or people or the collective was well positioned. If I look at other countries that have discovered, natural resources, no other country in the world has been in a position where I think if you do the maths now, then it means that every person in Norway is like worth 1.5 million or 2 million USD or something crazy. And so when I look at African countries like Mozambique, where they've just discovered a huge gas deposit, I think after all is said and done and it's extracted, I think 45% goes to Total, and then 40% to Qatar, and then 15% to private consortium, or my numbers could be wrong there, but it's something crazy where I think at the end of the day, Mozambique, the government gets maybe 3% or 5%. And the same thing in South Africa, where this is natural resources that essentially belong to the people that get, plundered and exploited and extracted and processed and refined and sold at market rates, but for the benefit of private companies. And so if there's one thing that Norway did do right, it's harnessing its natural resources.
Absolutely.
To give everyone
right
the healthcare and the dental and.
Right.
I just feel as though in 2021, we know that at some point the oil is going to run out and that we're moving to green economies. And I do feel that there's another huge oil well underneath the ground that's not being tapped, and that's called immigrants, So I feel as though there's a huge untapped potential with the ideas and the thinking that comes from outside, and that also needs to be nurtured, harnessed, tapped into, as opposed to just going, we don't want immigrants, and
Right.
And so
I couldn't agree more. And that's beautifully said.
Thank you. Yeah. And so I think in that way, people that come into Norway with other ideas and with new ideas, different ideas, should be looked at, and explored, So in South Africa, I think we incredibly competitive and entrepreneurial. Growing up in our household, my mom was like, son, you can leave this house as soon as you can afford to pay your own rent. And I was like, really? Watch me get a job and, go. Like, I'm out, As soon as you can afford your own car, you buy a car. I'm out, doing whatever it took, whatever it took. Just, and again, I grew up in apartheid, and my dad was like, look, son, here's the deal. Simple. We never had these opportunities and choices. You have it now. It's an open field. So you need to just outwork everyone. Simple. Like I couldn't be whatever I wanted to be. Neither could your mom, neither could our family. We couldn't. It was legislated. We couldn't own property in certain areas. We couldn't become certain things. So I grew up with an incredible amount of pressure to succeed because my forefathers and those that came before me never had any of those opportunities. And now suddenly I'm going to one of the finest high schools. 1994 is when apartheid ended. So, I grew up knowing, And so
how was that pressure on you?
Of course, you grow up knowing that your forefathers and your parents' generation, we had sports people throughout our family. My uncle is a top cyclist. My other uncle is baseball, athletics, you name it. We had people that were easily global level that just, they didn't have the access. And now, if you look at it now, in South Africa, the world's number one 400 meters is Wade van Niekerk. We just won the men's 100 meter relay race. Akani, pipping Brazil on the line,
Wow.
Chess, Mitchell's playing, so all of the talent is coming out now, and it's showing that, we've always had incredible talent in our country, And now, it doesn't happen overnight.
No.
Geez,
No. So what made you, you said you had even done martial arts for a long time. So what made you pursue specifically not sports, even though you were gifted in it?
Sports, again, I think is something that is always politically charged in South Africa, like it is in most other countries. And I went to a sporting high school, first and foremost. So the school that I went to was first and foremost a top sporting school. Mm-hmm. And I got into that school because of my chess playing ability.
Chess playing?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So wait, let me get this straight. We're here with a multi-talented guy, man. So you're highly skilled in chess?
Yes, yeah.
You almost were black belt in
karate, Shukokai, that's right.
Wow. And somehow you're revolutionizing tech and apps.
So okay.
These are a lot of branches that you could have picked and stayed in. So not only making the decision to say, okay, I'm sticking with this one.
Yeah.
Because that is, honestly, I would say the hardest thing with people who are gifted in a lot of fields.
Absolute, 100%.
So how did you pick what you picked?
Process of elimination. So I got to a point in Wynberg Boys where, from a cricketing perspective, I just knew that I was never going to be the top notch, because at some point, Albert Nkomo at the time, I asked him, I was like, listen, bro, give me your fastball. And I think Albert Nkomo at the time was bowling as fast as Lance Kloosner. And I remember being in the nets going, okay, I didn't see that ball. I'm not cut out with this. Like, wow. I just know I'm not going to make this, dude, you know.
You didn't see it?
I couldn't see the ball. I'm like, no, my eyes are just not good enough for this game, you know. And so, but the thing is, right, so my sister is an incredibly well-known and famous and talented actress, like completely. from the get-go. So I grew up knowing, like everyone knew that my sister is going to be this brilliant, awesome performer. And she's 3 years older than myself. And I've got a bit of a, showmanship, showboating thing going on. I was captain of the debating team. I enjoyed doing my Cape Town, Eisteddfod, thespian vibes, but didn't really interest me. What I did as a kid was always break all my toys to figure out how they worked. And so my dad was an engineer, and I loved engineering and figuring out how things worked. I just didn't want to do what my dad did, So he was in the garage pounding away. I'm like, I like it. I don't want to do that. I want to work, white collar or don't make my hands dirty. Because you know how long it takes to get your nails clean, and you're trying to go out with a shorty afterwards, and you're like, nah, bro, this is not going to work. And I was a petrolhead, and so I liked how things worked. And chess for me, I read it somewhere, it was a game of kings. And I always just believed that, chess was a game where you separate the men from the boys. Other dudes are out here playing checkers. I'm like, nah, son, get the chess game, get the chessboard. And so I really enjoyed it because I felt it was a true test of, your sort of mental prowess. And just thinking so many moves ahead. And again, it comes back to sort of the surfing and seeing a wave and understanding all these different logic gates. And so really what I wanted to do for a living, this is going to sound so crazy, was I wanted to be the guy. So I'm going to go back now. So in the 90s, I was always with cars, fast cars. And in the late 80s and 90s, there was the switch over from carbureted engines, from the old Datsuns and Escorts, to fuel-injected cars like your Golf GTI and your Opel Kadett GSI. And so the I meant fuel injection, right? Which meant that the fuel in the car was controlled electronically. And so that changed engineering in a huge way, because before the injection cars, to modify the car, you would upgrade the carburetors, or you would put a different cam in. You'd upgrade the brakes. It was a manual thing. Now suddenly you've got these cars that are electronically controlled. The fuel injection, it's timed electronically. So now you can't just take the fuel injection off and put in. You could chip it. Okay. You could put a new chip in. So I wanted to be the guy that could reprogram the chip for better performance. So it was still cars and engineering and mechanics, but with a laptop and a suit, some other dude's going to be fitting the oil and doing the thing, But
with the dirty nails.
But I'm out here with the laptop. Yeah. And so with that being said, I did an in-service at BMW while I was in high school. That's how serious I was. I went to BMW. I'm like, look, I'm going to be an engineer at BMW. And I had an uncle who was a well-known BMW mechanic who had his own dealership called Mech 5. And that was my passion, and it still is my passion. I'm passionate about cars. Like, I am incredibly passionate about classic sports cars of the 70s and just sports cars in general. Not on a superficial level, on a very detailed level. And so after this apprenticeship, they said, look, Tauriq, again, you were ahead of your time, dude. Like reprogramming these chips. I mean, that's something that we're not quite sure. And I could see what was going to happen. And so again, today in 2021, if you have a BMW or a Mercedes or an Audi and you want the car to go faster, you take it to the dealership or to an electronic shop and they chip it for you. They call it chipping or mapping. They map the chip. So that's what I wanted to do, get the laptop. And then they said, you got to study programming, you got to study machine language and programming. And then that's what I did, hated it. I was like, hated it. Programming, like, well, I hated it because I couldn't see how it was getting me closer to my vision and dream of reprogramming these cars' chips. I was just doing it to, and then at some point you've got to make a choice, right? And so in my studies and in this course, I eventually landed up in private banking or finance as a project manager with an understanding of coding.
Of course.
But that's life, Right. But for me, it was still just understanding how things work.
But would you ever now, because I know that, yes.
I will go back to cars.
You got the answer. Well, but how? How would, have you thought about it? Have you mapped out the plan? Because that's a quick yes.
So I've still maintained my passion with cars, right? And I've collected. So I've owned an E-Type Jaguar, which for me is one of the world's most, finest cars ever.
E-type Jaguar.
The E-type Jaguar is just one of the finest.
I haven't seen it. Can you E-type Jaguar? I know cars.
Yeah.
Ish.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
I know, but I can appreciate
the E-type.
mechanics.
The E-type Jaguar is probably one of the finest looking cars you'll ever see. And if we call it up, you'll see it's just one of the most beautiful cars. I've also owned the BMW, the E39 M5.
Yeah, we'll need to use Google for this. Wow.
Isn't that beautiful?
Is James Bond's?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Ish. That one looks very.
All of those are all, yeah. And so I had a primrose yellow E-type Jag.
Yellow.
Primrose yellow, yeah, with a black leather interior and the aircraft switches.
No wonder he wanted to stay in cars. It's beautiful. It looks really good. Like.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. It's when the British. That's when they still made cars. Yeah, there we go.
Primrose yellow.
Well, easily, yeah.
Awesome.
That one right there, So,
awesome.
Also in the stable, I owned an E39 M5, which is for me one of the last true thoroughbred, M5s that BMW made. It was just a V8 beast of a car. It had one sport button. That was it. There wasn't gadgets and gizmos and all of these things. I think E39. Sorry, E39. Yeah. Yeah, that's a beast. So this is the one over here, right there.
Right, I see it.
They used to call me Gaddafi in Cape Town.
No way.
Because they just thought like when they heard this thing coming through. And then at the moment right now, back home in Cape Town, I've got a 1972 BMW 2002 TII. And so this is the car that I've got at home in Cape Town. So this little car, and this is something crazy, and this is, one of the reasons I collected or really fought to find this. So remember I mentioned that there were carbureted engines and then there were fuel-injected engines, right? So the Germans, they knew that the next evolutionary step in engineering is fuel injection. They knew this. And this car represented the halfway step. In other words, it had a mechanical fuel injection. So the Germans knew fuel injection was the next step, but they didn't get the electronics.
No.
So they had the injection.
Mechanical.
And then literally 2 years later, they came out with the first Bosch Motronic injection. And so this car revived and put BMW on the map because it did two things, right? So before this car came around, there were sports cars that had 2 doors, Lamborghini, Porsche, 2 doors, 2 seats. And then there were family cars, 4 doors, 4 seats, right? Simple. The 2002 came as a little unassuming car with 2 doors but 4 seats. So they said, we're going to create a sporty little car with 2 doors but 4 seats. So you can still put your family in the back.
Right.
And it was this little tiny thing that came out, and they dropped a 2-liter engine in there. And this thing, they used to call it the whispering bomb.
The whispering bomb.
The whispering bomb. And then the Germans got radical and they turbocharged it, right?
As they do.
They in 74, and they only built 1,672 turbos in the world because then the oil crisis hit. And the turbo was such a wild car that they actually had the words 202 turbo in reverse on the bumper. So when it came behind you, you could see in your rear view 202 turbo.
That is funny.
And they pulled that car off the road. The Germans, they stopped making that car. But that car then sealed the fate and put BMW on the map forever. This was the car that revived BMW and created what we now call, the modern sports car sedan. This tiny little thing. Yeah, it really it's crazy.
So much history behind it, like
unassuming. Yeah,
right. Very unassuming. Very, and I like that it's kind of like a hybrid car in the sense that,
It
between
was
two worlds.
It's that car. And this thing used to run the 911s, man, around the racetracks. This thing used to run the 911s and the Alphas. And this really was a car that, in fact, just punch in BMW 222 Turbo, just so we can see what it looks like. 2002 Turbo. And you'll see this insignia, or you see it at the front bumper. It's written.
I do see it.
And these cars today are worth a small. You can't buy these cars now. They're so expensive. It's incredible.
So what are you waiting for to get back into cars? I know that you haven't said, with the waves, you got to look at the horizon, you got to time it. So is there anything specific you're waiting for?
That's a good question.
Because I know you have just finished and exited
yes.
Let's call it the app with the food.
The digital canteen. So
yes.
you spot on. And so what I am noticing, and if I look at cars, the next wave for me, in my mind would be the understanding that mobility has changed fundamentally. Mobility. And so the car was this tool that we used to get us from A to B, right? Simple. And you bought this car and you paid it off over 5 years. But let's take a step back for a second. It is the worst investment you can make because it's sleeping for 16 hours a day, right? As an investment. In other words, when you drive to work, it parks in a garage for 8 hours. And then you drive it home and then you sleep for 8 hours and then it's sleeping. And what Tesla is doing is, firstly, it made a viable alternative, which is electric. Let's not talk about where the lithium for the batteries are coming from for now. Let's give Elon Musk a break there.
Right. There's a lot he has done lately that we need to give him a break on.
Are we going to touch on the Bitcoin? And there's a lot, dude.
We'll give him a break. We're
going to give him a break, but what he's done now is he's created a fleet of transport where, me and you both know in Oslo, you open your app and you choose Nabobil, you rent your car, you rent the car, you drive around, you give it back. There's no need to own it. As big of a petrol head as what I am, I don't own a car in Norway. Well, I can't afford it. Startup life, we always broke, So you can't afford it. The pumping, changing the tires. I still have the 222 back home, and that's great.
Perfect.
But I think what Tesla is doing is, once they deploy self-driving cars, you could literally just hail a Tesla. You could put your Tesla out in the field like an Uber.
Right. Self-driving Uber.
Yes, there's more than enough cars to just get you from A to B. So if we think of the car as a mechanism of mobility, then, and I'm not saying that we all need to just give our Porsches and our 222s away.
Right.
There will always be people that see cars as more than just a tool from A to B. But you get people that they don't really care, man. They want to turn the key and go. They don't care like what happens when you turn the key. Like me, I'm a petrol. I love the roar and the sound of this engine and all the mechanics. I'm just that guy. And there's probably less of us now. There's just people that, so many young people I've met that they don't have a license. They're like, I just call an Uber or I just get on a tram. It's okay.
I don't even have a license.
Yeah, you don't need to.
No.
As long as you can get from A to B, you're good. Whether it's a scooter, whether it's a car.
Yeah.
And so I think with cars and that sort of wave, I see a fundamental shift in mobility. A pet project that I'd like to do, which I've been scratching around in, is finding out how to retrofit classic cars with modern electronic powertrains, because I'd like an E-Type Jag. You saw how beautiful that car was. Why can't we have an E-powered version of it, as an example? And there are guys doing it in the US called EV West and a few other guys, and I've reached out to them and I said, look, I'm in Oslo. Should we try and do something here? It's incredibly expensive, but I do feel as though design for me stopped in the 70s. Cars will just look the same now. Can you tell the difference between an Audi and a Mercedes or a BMW? No, man, they're all just like shiny with blue lights. They all have like blue lights and they all shiny.
So what do you think about the design of the Cybertruck?
It makes a statement.
Because it definitely, you will spot it a mile away.
Mile away.
Like you just said, it design is more or less the same since the 70s. And then came the Cybertruck, who was like sharp corners, Lego, one piece, one steel.
Done.
It floats in water because it's literally a single piece.
It's a single piece. I mean, again, shout out Elon, for just changing the game and doing something different. Because cars today tire me when I look at these cars and, there's no real progress. They've just added more gizmos, but fundamentally, in terms of how the car functions, there's an engine, a gearbox, and a differential. That's the components. And the engine and the way it functions hasn't changed in like hundreds of years.
No. And honestly, I feel it's because we are sticking to the same fuel.
Yep.
When you stay...
Oh, man.
Yeah, when you stay... I don't care if you're a car, or a human being. When you stay on the same fuel, you're putting a cap on your progress. You need to change fuel.
Let's get into changing all that fuel. I mean, now we're touching on oil and resources. And I think in the US, the oil industry I think they bought out Amtrak, American Railways, to ensure that people use cars. There were all sorts of,
That's horrible.
Yeah. To make sure that people used cars so they could sell more oil and, keep this machine going, and how much of our progress has been limited by, oil, capitalism.
Yeah. Because at a certain point, honestly, you have to take a step back and see, okay, are certain elements that we're holding to keeping us back from actually progressing? Oil is one of them. I don't know if you saw the documentary, how the first electric car was killed, or how they killed the first electric car. I'm messing up the title, but it's about exactly that. And this goes way back.
Yeah.
Where literally oil company has been halting the progress of electric cars.
Absolutely.
And Elon couldn't do what he has done today if he had to design it as a gas car. I'll give an example. The only reason the Tesla is the safest car on the road in every category is because it is electric. And people are like, wait, how? The battery of the car has been spread out on the bottom of the car, which has given it a much lower point of gravity.
Center of gravity, yeah.
And this alone has changed so much in how the car does not tip over.
Oh my God, I never even thought of that.
How the car, when it collides,
the impact.
So just that could
alone
have never happened if the car was gas.
That's crazy. That is crazy. And performance-wise, I'm the first to admit, as a petrol head, when I got here, a friend of mine had a Tesla, I'm like, come dude, let me see this thing.
Right.
I had to just eat the humble pie and be like, this thing is so fast. Like, throw the M5 away, throw the Porsche away,
It's instant, because you're not waiting for combustion to occur.
Nothing.
It's electric.
It's electric. Instant torque. No gearing.
No.
Zoop. I love it. I want one.
But that's exactly it. The substrate or the fuel for the car industry is holding it back.
Yeah.
You change the fuel, you change the soil that you put a plant to grow in, it's going to grow better.
Yeah.
We're feeding the same soil. We're feeding the same fuel. It's the same with human beings. You feed the same literature or Yanteloven to generations and generations. You're holding the entire civilization back.
Absolutely.
It's the same fuel.
Yeah.
So how do we change? Because, entrepreneurship is the fastest growing job description today.
Yes.
How do we change the fuel for the entrepreneur listening?
In Norway or in Oslo?
I would specifically say that.
Oof, man. You're coming with the big ones here.
If anyone knows more or less the answer, I would say it's you, because you have gone through not only the apartheid, Cape Town, sports, the car world, because let's be honest, it's very different. The competition there and the tech there needed. But now you're in digitalizing products. That is literally the boundary between, let's say, reality and virtual reality.
Yeah.
So if anyone knows how to navigate these waters, you have one of the highest shots, I would say.
I think to provide fuel for it there's a few things, right? So for me, if you have 3 circles and you join them, in those, finding the sweet spot. If you did one of those things in Norway for entrepreneurship, then your first circle would probably be academia. Then your second circle would be the public sector, and the third third circle would be the private sector. And so there needs to be an orchestrated or unison focus on harnessing those three components, and having them come together to nurture the ecosystem, right? So that you have people that are young, that are studying, that are coming up with new ideas that get fed into the public sector and the private sector, right? And there needs to be sort of an overarching understanding of, look, man, we're going to grow our startup ecosystem. And so in that regard, you've got government facilities like Innovation Norway as an example.
Right.
But in my mind, why don't we have the founders of some of the most successful startups sitting on the board of Innovation Norway, so that when the next generation of startups or founders come through the ranks, there's a guy that's been down the road that can be like, you know what, this guy sounds like he's 5 years ahead, but give him time and nurture him. Because I've been there. Yeah.
Sounds like a younger me, as they say.
Yes, I've been there. I can coach him.
You know? Who's on the board of Innovation Norway?
I don't know, but I'm not wildly confident about the fact that even if they wanted to, they'd have the ervaring or the utdanning or the experience to understand the challenges faced by entrepreneurs. Because the ecosystem is only, like 5 years old. So you've got the startup lab, which is a nice area. And what I've experienced personally is investors locally sometimes want you to think big and think global. Think global, but want to pay you local. And when I say pay you local, that's like, I'm going to give you 5 million NOK for, 20% of your company.
For taking over the world, for thinking global.
Yes, and so me coming from Cape Town here, I'm not under any illusion as to the fact that there's just 5 million people in Norway and there's 800,000 in Oslo. So this is very much a petri dish. Exactly. It's a nice little playpen. It's a nice little pond.
Exactly.
But in the back of my mind, I've got New York, Johannesburg, Tokyo, India. People that are working twice as hard, twice as fast. I was at an investor conference one day. No names will be mentioned, but this was the funniest thing. And I was telling this guy about Kinga Insurance, B2B, SaaS platform, and applying for funding and all of these things, and how this product is geared. It's the vision is a pan-African platform, and I'm just focused on Africa. And he was like, but why Africa? And I'm like, well, this is where it's needed. And he's like, but we have everything here as well. We're so advanced in Norway, like we have everything. And I'm like what? And he's like, oh, we've got like new tech companies like Vips. And I'm like, Vips? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, Vips is, 3 years old. That's like 15 years behind the curve. He's like, what do you mean 15 years behind the curve? And I'm like, well, we've had M-Pesa in Africa for the last 12 years. And he says, but I've never heard of M-Pesa.
Because both of them are apps that make
mobile money
users send money to each other freely, right?
Yes. And he's like, but I've never heard of M-Pesa. And I'm like, okay, but like the 40 plus million people that use M-Pesa never heard of Vips and probably don't care about the, maybe 2 million people that use, like really, dude.
Come on, Vips. Your pride of joy is Vips. The US has had also solutions for years.
And so, there's this thing with it comes back to the perception of Africa and risk. Is Africa a dangerous country? Like, should we invest? And, there's a few people here that are making huge leaps and strides towards investing in Africa and understanding that from an entrepreneurial perspective, people are doing things in Africa that are like next level. And when I look at some of the like latest tech here, then I'm just like, okay. Good luck with that, I'm just like, good on you.
Right.
If you're going to serve this market here locally, then okay,
right.
And again, take nothing away. It like I say, Norway is amazing for Norwegians, and so if there's something that works and pops off in this market, great. It may or may not be something that can be exported. And I learned that lesson myself, where we took the digital canteen. We took that to Cape Town. It was more of a vanity thing, I think, honestly speaking, because I wanted to prove that it was like an Uber platform. You could process a payment globally. It fell flat in Cape Town. I got a couple of places signed up, but it didn't take off, and it obviously needed quite a concerted effort to get it going. So the market, the timing maybe right idea, but wrong timing. Whereas with COVID, there was 3 or 4 companies that started doing deliveries, pre-order deliveries, like sprang up. And one guy was actually at the university with me. And I tried to reach out to him and say like, hey man, actually we did this a couple of years ago in Oslo and we learned some lessons. And, I shared some of the gems with him in terms of the pricing model and like, understanding where the sweet spot lies in terms of your production and your logistics. And it was nice to almost see that market grow,
Wow.
And just look at it and be like, okay.
But look, so I would take away 2 things from this. The first thing I would see is, okay, you're basically playing a very difficult game in a country that isn't exactly the easiest country to play in.
That's right.
So why did you stay in Norway? That's the first thing I would say.
Okay. So, it's a hard question. So,
I hope I'm not bringing out any existential crisis.
No. I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this because when you have to say it back to someone,
right.
So we made a decision, my wife and myself, that for various reasons, and that's another podcast on its own. Why did you leave South Africa? But we made the decision to leave Norway and to leave South Africa and to raise a family in Norway. That was the decision we made. Come by hook or by crook, the pros and the cons, for better or for worse.
Right.
One of the learnings for myself in that process, in the process of deciding to go, was for me to decide for myself that I wanted to go for myself and not for my wife. Because I didn't want to be in a position where if it went wrong, I would say, can you see? I did this for you and look what happened. I didn't want her to be sort of the ransom card, in that regard. And so I needed to decide for myself, like Tauriq Adams, are you going to leave everything you know in Cape Town? Leave your sports cars,
right.
the sushi,
right.
the apartment, the
sushi in Cape Town?
Well, cheap sushi. Or just the ability to eat out every single night. You're going to leave that behind. And that was the decision, right? And it was incredibly tough. Having said that, though, it's a decision I don't regret because there've been highs and lows. And the nice thing is that South Africa is an incredibly volatile country. And there's no doubt in my mind that for whatever reason, I could not see myself having the similar kind of impact in South Africa. And so we made the right decision. I made the right decision. And if anything, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger.
Right.
And so in fact, my father-in-law wrote me a beautiful card for my birthday. He was like, that the challenges have really stood in line for you here in Norway, but he's encouraged by how I've tackled it. And I remember telling my mom, I was like, hey, moms, why are you worried? There's only 5 million Norwegians, man. Cape Town has 8 million people, I've had to just, kick
right.
butt and take names, man. I mean, that name list is longer than the amount of people I'll meet here, So, you wake up with that drive. And catching a wave is hard.
Yeah.
You got to be strong. You got to paddle and catch it and go for it, And so these are these things that you think about. And so, it's snowing. So either you hide away from the snow, you learn to ski, man. Come on. And so the thing that I learned is, I learned 2 things. Number 1, the grass isn't green on the other side. The grass is green there where you water it.
I like that.
Right. And number 2, probably more importantly, and this comes from a Buddhist saying, which I jacked, which just kept me sane, is wherever you go, there you are, right? Which means all of your ideas, thinking, perceptions, interactions, and your own thought processes, you take no matter where you go. And so the story goes something like this. There was a Buddhist sitting at the gates of a village, and there were passers-by entering the village. And the passers, before entering the gates of the village, would ask him, excuse me, sir, what's it like in this village that we're about to go into? And you'd ask them, what was it like where you guys came from? And the people would say, oh, no, it was terrible. People were selfish and they just didn't share anything and it was terrible. And he's like, oh, well, much of the same here. Then another family would come and be like, excuse me, sir, what's this village like here with, behind these gates? And he'd say, what was it like where you came from? Oh, no, it was wonderful. People shared everything and it was very open and honest and sincere. And he's like, oh, well, pretty much the same. But the lesson here is you take yourself wherever you go, and so moving to an entirely different country that's on the other spectrum from the south of Africa to like the north of Europe couldn't be more opposite.
No.
It taught me a whole bunch about myself and how I viewed things. And is there just almost the limitless possibilities and opportunities, or is it like just cold and dark? Like I meet people like, oh man, I can't find any work. And I'm like, okay. And other people, I'm like, I got so much to do, and so.
That is brilliant because, and even that story, much of the same here. It really comes down to that. It really comes down to how are you viewing and perceiving your surroundings? Because your thoughts will create that reality,
Absolutely.
It really does play a major role where you're coming from.
Yeah, and so, when I came here, I was on the Samfunnskunnskap course and, the cultural, all of those things. And I'm on like New to Oslo, which is a big Facebook group.
Right.
And something I laugh about is the amount that people complain about like small things, whether it's the ticketing on the T-Bahn or the buses, or people complain like a lot. And like immigrant people, or people that, just before I continue, I'd like to say one thing, and that's there's a difference between a refugee and an immigrant. And I think people conflate it,
Exactly.
When you willingly choose to go to a country, it's like, I'm now choosing to go. It's like, you don't choose to go to Norway and be like, the sun's not shining. It's like, what do you expect, bro? It's not Spain. So we can understand. So we can understand where we're at, But I find that a lot of people complain so much about like everything. And the complaints often come from people that come from countries that on paper are a lot worse off. And so one guy, I'm like, well, what were the buses like where you came from? And I'm like, bro, come on, man. Like if the bus is 1 minute late or whatever. So for me, I always try and have a balanced view on most things. And the other thing is the perspective. And when I say perspective, it's the lens you use. And, if you step back and and you sort of use these lenses to sort of get the picture that's the best one to see, So you can almost always view things positively, or almost. Of
course. It's a state of mind, man.
You have the ability to frame things.
Exactly.
You can choose the framing of it.
Yeah.
And so.
Even happiness, they say, it is a state of mind. You can be in seventh heaven in prison.
Absolutely.
And you could feel like you're in prison in the middle of a crowd.
Yeah. And and again, I'm not trying to paint Norway with this like beautiful one and be like, oh, it's amazing, because the weather, man, the darkness, the weather, the people, like, it's hard, man. Come on, it's hard. Like, I'm here with you, on a Tuesday. My wife is like, who's this guy? I'm like, you never go out for anyone. Like, and I'm like, you know what, my love, you choose to share your energy with the people that you resonate with, like you're going to vibe with people that you connect with, and for me, that's important, because in the beginning, I was like, Cape Town energy, Africa, blah, 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 and people are like, who's this guy? I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you're way too, like, whoa.
Right.
And then I had to sort of figure out, like, okay, this is how society functions here, and then you've got to sort of find, like, who you connect with and who you gel with.
It might be too loud for the reserved type of Norwegian vibration.
Yes. I had to tone it down. Just leave it in first gear, until I find someone like, oh, we can turn it up a little bit, You
might even need to leave it in neutral. First gear is too loud.
Reverse gear. Go backward. And that comes to that cultural thing of, walking around the porridge and the Janteleuven and trying to fit in. And one guy I was talking to is Egyptian. He had an incredibly tough time. And I said, dude, just do what the Norwegians do, man. Go skiing, go walking in the forest. And he came back and he was like, Tauriq, I went for a walk in, it was Almond Collar or somewhere. I met so many people. And I'm like, there you go, bro.
That's where they are.
In some ways, it's not hard,
Right.
And I mean, I literally So when I got here, I didn't have work as one. I mean, who has work? You know, so it's the 9-month immigration process of paperwork, and
Exactly.
you're not
It's really
allowed to
tough.
work.
No.
But I couldn't sit at home. In fact, I did sit at home for like a week, which was fantastic. But then I was like, I need to catch a wave now. You know, so I had a week of like just chilling and enjoying their southern and going down to the beach and looking at the Bambi and being like, you know. But then I was like,
Perfect.
okay, I'm done now. I need to do something. So I'd go with my wife. We'd hop in the boat together and come into the city. Put my backpack on. Put the sandwich. Maatpakken.
Right.
Poor leg. You know. Flask with the coffee.
This is typical Norwegian.
You know,
Man.
flask, coffee, and
Right.
I'd literally go down into town. I'd go to the old Kulturhuset, Doga, cruise around, discovered 1 or 2 spots, mesh, and I'd literally just hunt for the best free Wi-Fi with the cheapest refill coffees. And so like Stockflat's WB Samson, because they got the $10 refill or something. You know, this is while I'm typing up and sending out CVs and just hustling, you know. And I literally just pounded the streets looking for a vibe.
Wow.
I was just walking aimlessly, actually. There was no like master plan, to be very honest.
Wow.
I just let my mind take me wherever. And Anna was like, what are you doing during the day? Like, I don't understand what you... So she finished work at like maybe 4 or 5. And whatever happened, I'd make sure that I was at her doorstep at her company so that we could travel home together.
Nice.
And if I ended up sitting at one place the entire day or walking the entire day, it's what I did without spending. Like, I wasn't eating out and being extravagant. And Mesh ended up becoming a favorite place in Kulturhuset, and there was, what's this other place, in Centrale, and there was 657, and this was before Spaces even opened up, but there were all these little spots. There was Oslo Business Region, and they always had like a 3-day pass, like a freebie to try it out. You know, so I'd always be like, I'm interested in this, can I get a 3-day pass to just check it out? And I'll just flex there for the day and check it out, you know, and then move to the next one, you know.
Hustling workspaces.
Yeah, I'm just
man.
like, you know.
That's great. That's
yeah.
great. But did you have a calm in you when doing this? Like, you know, I'll find my people, I'll find the road, I'll find the path?
Absolutely. There was never a doubt that I'd connect. And I was on a call one day, and then a woman came to me like, are you from South Africa? I know your accent. And then I met with her, and we just connected randomly, Laverne. And then she told me about a concert. And then I went to this concert with other South African friends, and then I met more South Africans.
Right.
I met a guy who was at Mesh as well. Black guy, was in dark. Looked at him, he looked at me. And then I heard his voice, and I'm like, bro, you from South Africa? He's like, yeah. I'm like, let's hang out. What's up? What you doing? You know?
Because that is, I feel, the scariest part of entrepreneurship, the unknown, you know, the wandering, the, okay, am I going to find the right people, place, investor, book, whatever, you know, and that can choke people up, right? Like, even, I mean, we have people in this room that came from Greece and literally were, you could say, the first months of their stay in Norway, wandering as well. But now, you know, Alex has done some crazy stuff.
But, and, not but, it's an and. And that's where the magic happens. Yeah. It's in the unknown for me. It's in the space where you open yourself to every possibility. Right? And so every morning when you open your eyes, you either repeat the exact same thing you did the day before with the same thinking and the same pattern. And so one of the things I'm always conscious of is the voice in your head. I got to do this. The moment you step back or just hear what this voice is saying, you begin to understand the soundtrack that you're telling yourself, because that's how your brain works. There's just this voice that raps like constantly. Right. The moment you stop and you can hear this thing and listen to the stories it's telling you, you begin to go, hang on a second, this is not positive, or this is not serving me, you know? And that's when you begin to take control on how your mind works and how you begin to see things, because this is this thing that runs 24/7.
It does.
You know, from the time you wake up in the morning all the way through, it's just this voice. And so I think the first thing you've got to do is, and I'm not trying to say like, if you think positively, you'll be a millionaire. I'm not trying to say that. You know, you get some dude that like, you know, all you got to do is just manifest the money.
Right.
It's like, no. Hang on. But, you know, just pump the brakes. But a big part for me is the moment you step into that space where it is the unknown, it's where the magic happens, because it's suddenly not known. And if we think about it, we are living in an uncertain time where the old days, I mean, all the old corporates were all run by like chartered accountants. They became the CEOs, chartered accountants. What did we sell before? What do we need to sell? Let's make sure that that graph stays stable. Keep the shareholders happy. Tim Cook.
Right.
Classic.
Right.
Dudes just operationalize. Have they made anything new? No, they haven't, man. They're just selling more dongles and more accessories. Like, when was the last time Apple made something that was like, wow? No, dude.
It's over.
It's over.
It's over.
So, you know, when you move into that space and you step into the unknown, suddenly anything and everything is possible. You know, you opened yourself into a space of, and for me, leaving my corporate job and what I was doing in South Africa when I came in, that first few weeks of just going, because my wife was like, look, I've got a good job, I'm paying the rent, we eating. There's no need for us to like both hustle. You have time. And something I actually want to touch on now that we're talking about entrepreneurship is support, right? And I feel like immigration and asylum and these words that are conflated, support is one of them, because without the support of someone like my wife, I could never, ever, ever, ever do what I'm doing. And support is a word that, you got to support your friends, you know, click a like and a share. But in the entrepreneurship world, support actually means that there's months where you can't pay the bond or the rent or the groceries. You know, support means that your partner that you go to bed with at night is buying the pair of shoes for you that you really want because you just don't have a cent. Yeah. You know, support is your wife actually going, you know, how much money do you need this month? Right. Like, how much do you need? Right. You know, like, I can pay this. What do you need? You know, and that's the real side of entrepreneurship as well. Besides all of the, I've got a great idea, you know, like in South Africa, you meet some dude, it's like, I'm an entrepreneur. It's like, oh, you a kid with a trust fund. You know, you have a trust fund. That's what you are, you know, trustafarian.
There's a difference.
You know, and so you're also in this position where your mother, your sister, your wife, your brother-in-law, everyone supports you and guides you and, you know, gives you the kind of encouragement to continue doing, because again, you know, it's a risk.
It's very risky.
It's
high risk, and it's low reward statistically.
Statistically, it's not for everyone. No. That's why I'm saying I meet people, I'm like, yo, take the job. Yeah. Me too. You know, these days where I'm like, fast job, benefits, dental, looking good, canteen food. Give me that canteen food. Give me that card, that little disc that they carry around that you swipe it. I want one of those, you know, I want to just clock in. Very
tempting. Vacation days.
You know,
maternal, paternal.
Yeah, so support is a big thing. But coming back to your point on where the magic happens, you know, if you allow yourself to step into this place where almost anything is possible, then again, anything is possible. And for me, there's so many moments, I don't want to get too deep, but there are so many moments when I don't have the answers and then the phone rings and it's some guy that gives me a call that says, hey, I met this person and I told him about you, and then things unfold. And I'm just like how did that happen? Right. You know, so if you think about like the quantum universe and like the realm of possibilities, anything is possible. But you've got to be open to receiving that.
How does one open oneself to receiving that? How do you open yourself to receiving that? I
open myself. Well, I'd like to think that I understand sort of two components of, you know, people talk about the law of attraction as a big thing. And I'm a big believer in the law of attraction. But I understand that you have the vision. You have the vision board. You write down your goals. You write down your accomplishments and what you would want. You meditate, you visualize it, you embrace the feeling. But what happens is people then open their eyes after the meditation and they check their bank balance and they look where they live and they look what they drive and they're like, And so you work harder trying to accomplish the future state, right? What that does though, however, is you programming yourself and you're staying in the zone of the separation, the lack, as opposed to staying in the zone of the vision. So for me, when you open your eyes and you go, oh, my bank account is 3,000 crowns, but I want 3 million. That difference is the thought that you're carrying throughout the day is the difference. And so you can work harder and work harder and work harder, but you're focusing on the lack. What you want to do is you've got the Palace or the 911 or the E-Type Jaguar. And that feeling you have when you're sitting in the E-Type. And again, I told my moms, I'm going to, when my homie was like, what do you want to do, bro? I'm like, I just want to be a tycoon with sports cars, bro. And he's like, dude, you work at Woolworths earning 8 an hour. I'm like, I know. I'm going to be a tycoon with sports cars in a penthouse in the middle of the city. And the dude was like, bro, you a T. Right. So that feeling, the feeling of the millionaire or the feeling of abundance is what I carried. And so when you resonate on that frequency with that feeling, the experience comes to you. That's when you open yourself up to the experience. And so the thing is, people always, they react and they wait for a condition for them to feel happy. It's like you wait for the raise or the promotion to feel good or to feel happy, right? For me, internally, once you are happy, things happen. When you create the feeling yourself.
I see. So essentially you're saying circumstances are not the prerequisite. The prerequisite is being.
Exactly.
And then the circumstances.
Absolutely. You create it internally first. I see it here first. I see this here in my mind first. I see it. I tap into the feeling of it. A friend of myself, we call each other the untouchables.
The untouchables?
The untouchables. There's only one other untouchable in Cape Town and myself. But this sounds like an episode of some mafia movie, The Untouchables.
Sounds like we have to wipe the tapes after.
Yeah. But the point is, you embrace this feeling first, and then things around you happen and manifest. It's like, it sounds so cheesy, but it's like, be the change you want to see in the world, Gandhi, whatever. But on the real though, right. What I would do, and to answer your question, to open yourself up to the possibility, is I try and stay in the zone and the feeling of the vision, and then it manifests. And the craziest thing is, I've got a book at home with the exact color M5 and the exact color of the 222 in that book. The exact. Now, how the hell did I find a 1972 222 Tii? Like, the way that car came to me. Right. My best friend wrote my car off. He borrowed my car. He wrote the car off. He crashed the car. Another good friend of mine gave me a Cape Ads ad and said, Tauriq, you were asking about a 222. I saw an advert. I phoned the ad. It's the red 1972 Tii. The silver E39 M5 dream car that I just used to read about. A friend of mine phoned me, is like, there's a guy in Hout Bay. He's a karate sensei. I think he wants to sell this car. Phone the guy, get there. Silver, the way I saw it, bro. Silver E39, exact car. Like, I couldn't believe it. I bought my wife a Fiat 500 at the time I sold that car. She was like, can you sell my... I'm like, baby, you chill up. Hold up, baby. This is different. And so, you see it. And then, of course, you don't just wake up and be like, it's going to fall in. You continue to do the work. You got to do the work and get there and plow through it. It's like, you don't manifest a wave and you catch it. You've got to still paddle for it and get fit and put yourself in the position and put yourself in the space for that to unfold. And so...
That's honestly, I feel it's one of those things where you could conquer it in a blink of an eye, or you could literally conquer this hack. Let's call it this biohacking in a way. It might take you a lifetime. It's so different for so many people. Some people might literally learn it just by listening to what you said and go, holy shit, I get it, right? Yeah. And some people, they will have to try, because you have to detach yourself from cause and effect.
Absolutely.
Cause and effect is everything around us. I pushed this glass over. Because I pushed it, it fell.
Absolutely.
That's like the Newtonian laws of physics, right?
Absolutely.
But we live in a world where our five senses respond to the Newtonian laws. Detaching yourself from that is learning how to walk again.
100%. In fact, I had an experience when I was at university where I had a medical episode where I went a little bit off the rails and all sorts of conditions, right? The medical term for it was a brief reactive psychosis.
Brief reactive psychosis.
Psychosis, a lack of sleep and just went off the rails and had to go on medication and the whole thing and paranoia. And I was a programmer, but I was burning the candle at both ends. And I lost the gear or whatever, and I had to go to the doctor, psychiatry, psychologist, the whole thing. And I'm happy to, talk about it. But something I learned in that process was your perception and how you view the world sort of creates your world. Like after I was cured, so to speak, I was able to see the world in different ways and decide how I wanted to feel about something. And almost go emotionally, this is making me feel a certain way. Oh, okay, let's examine that. Like, why do you feel like, how do you react, And so we touched on this when we just walked in, and I was saying that, you wake up in the morning and I prefer to just have the day come towards me and I sit on top of the day as opposed to like reacting. Right. So the moment you're reacting to something, it feels like for me, giving your power away. Someone phones and I'm like, that's that person. Doesn't affect my bubble of positivity and energy. I'm just here in the zone of power, creating my reality, mastering my destiny. People come at me with all sorts of things. You get these things. Of course, you can react. And no one's immune to like your emotions, right? But I mean, if you think about like what you hear, your emotions, your thoughts, and it goes back to what I was saying about when you start listening to this voice, and just noticing it and going like, oh, there's this thing. And so sometimes you have a bad experience where someone offended you or made you feel a certain kind of way. And, you can let it run its track and then that's it, But don't let it continue for too long, because now suddenly, you have this bad thought. The guy cut you off in traffic or like the dude got you on the T-Bahn with your ticket and he billed you 800, you get to work and you're like, the dude, blah, 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 and you're in a bad mood, and then you go home that night and then tell your wife, the dude.
It literally reminds me of this quote by Abdul Baha, and it goes like, be a master to your emotions, not its slave.
Ooh, that, my man.
And for me, that is the perfect definition, because when you're constantly reacting to your emotions, you're a slave.
100%.
You have no free will.
No.
You have no freedom.
Nothing. No.
Emotion says jump, you jump. Duck, you duck.
That's it. 100%. And again, coming back to entrepreneurship, the boardroom, you control your emotion. You can hold that beast. And you can use it, anger. You can use these emotions to power you.
Yeah.
But the moment you are swayed by wild emotions and you aren't able to detach and just, for me, sometimes you just take a deep breath. You're like, take it in, see it, detach a little bit, see what it's about, and then you make that move.
Because a lot of people will misunderstand and they'll be like, wait, emotions are important, right? We have to feel the emotions, right? But look, there's a difference.
Yeah.
When you're looking at a painting, you're observing the painting.
Yeah.
You're acknowledging what the painting is telling you. But you are not the painting. There's a huge difference. The painting is not manipulating you.
No.
Or literally confining your actions to a certain pattern.
Spot on.
Same thing with emotions. You look at your emotions. You acknowledge the emotions.
Yeah.
You see that it's not confining you to a certain behavioral pattern. And then you decide, do I use it? Do I not? Is this necessary? Is this not?
You spot on.
And
you 100%, and maybe I'm being a bit controversial,
right?
But on Facebook and on the social medias, there's a lot of young people that are like, oh, I'm so triggered right now. I saw this and I was triggered and I'm triggered and I'm triggered. And there are people that are walking around with what I would think are internal wounds that haven't healed and that they haven't done the work themselves. It's kind of like, to use a classic example, it's kind of like if you have a big splint in your arm, and instead of pulling the splint out and letting it bleed and be sore, you put this bandage around your arm to prevent you from touching it. And then you construct an arm brace.
Yeah.
so that you don't ever touch this splint in your arm, and then you end up putting on a backpack that puts your arm through, that shields your whole arm and your shoulder, and then you can't sleep at night, and so you construct and you keep building these things around this little wound, as opposed to just doing the work of going like, here's this wound, pull the splint out, move on. So
that is exactly, I would feel, the best way to show what's going on in today's I would have to generalize, unfortunately, but today's Facebook philosophy.
Oh man,
it's literally, I'm hurt, it's your fault.
Oof, don't even. Oh
you
man,
cannot, like, being hurt. I've forgotten who said this, but it was a quote. For every, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like, for every situation or for everything that you have been offended by, you have co-signed it. You cannot be offended.
First bump. Podcast, first bump.
We're doing,
boom, boom.
You cannot be offended by anything if you didn't co-sign that. It's you. You chose to be offended.
100%.
So don't come at me. Come at yourself.
Yeah. You can keep scrolling. Just go past the post.
Exactly.
Keep it moving.
Exactly.
Yeah. So and for me, that's in many ways, I feel as though that is life. I see the emotions and the thoughts and the things going past me, and I'm always aware of what that voice is telling me and how it's manipulating my thoughts when it comes to what's possible and what's not possible, and So maybe to wrap it up, I would say, what is possible for Tauriq in the coming weeks, months? What should we be looking out for? Because now you're like a wild cannon, right? You're loose. You're out there. You're the hunt again. Yeah.
You successfully did a lot of crazy work with the kitchen and.
So on that front, it's been 3 years in the making now. So Kinga Insurance is a Pan-African B2B platform where we're wanting to power insurance companies in Africa digitally.
Amazing.
So in the cloud, a lot of paperwork, claim forms, sign up,
right.
throw it all away, digitize everything, electronic, on the app, on the web.
Perfect.
Very simple. kingainsurance.com, blatant plug. I see you.
Perfect.
So that's currently happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as I mentioned before, we're also incubating a sort of platform again that talks to people and their habits. And we're very much in stealth mode on this and just refining and tweaking and putting things together. But, ultimately what I do look for are underserved markets that typically make use of digital processes. That make use of manual processes that can be digitized. Excellent. And so in many ways, the technology and the tools are there. It's just how you apply it. Yeah. It's like if you look at, I don't know, like a simple example, like I don't even have one off the top of the dome, but in many ways, so many things right now, like call centers,
right.
They are humans that are answering a phone that typically need you to just submit a document. And so why can you not just, open up your phone and submit the document, as an example? And so...
Okay. No, I see that. There is a lot of industries that are being wasted with human power when it could be literally turned into an app.
Yes, and COVID has accelerated that process. Again, a lot of people are clinging onto how it used to be.
Right.
And a lot of people are embracing it and be like, you know what, we don't have to have 500 people in a hall for a presentation. We can just have a virtual conference and, there's all the 500 people and we're talking and it's great. And instead of 500 people, it can be 5 million people now because anyone, anywhere in the world. And so instead of charging 500 people in Oslo 1,000 crowns to come to a conference, you can charge 50 crowns and then advertise that same conference, but to a 6 billion marketplace, and so it just goes, oh, wow.
Honestly, man, your approach is very simple, but it yields results. And I love that. We'll have to speak way more about this later.
Oh, man. Thank you so much.
Dude, it was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I could go 2 more hours. But we'll definitely speak more about this. And we can find you on LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever.
LinkedIn, Instagram, the normal Tauriq Adams. Yeah.
Tauriq Adams. Dude, it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again, man.
Yes.
Really. All right,
guys, awesome.